Okay, we'll start with this one. Word around the campfire seems to be there's a lot of action coming to the featherweight division. Mrdjenovich versus Torres, Serrano versus an opponent that has yet to be announced. And, in all likelihood, these are gimme fights. These are tune-up fights for the two reigning champions involved. Jelena Mrdjenovich, the unified WBA and WBC champion, and Amanda Serrano, WBO champion. In truth, in this situation, I'm not critical of either of these fighters having these tune-up fights, these gimme fights. They've got cobwebs that need to be shaken off. Moreover, these fights are merely a prelude to a showdown between the WBA and WBC champion and the WBO champion. This is just a prelude for Mrdjenovich versus Serrano. And I'm all for that. I've expressed that sentiment several times already. However, now that this news is spreading just about as fast as COVID
did back in March,
what comes to mind, who comes to mind, is the newly crowned IBF featherweight champion, Sarah Mahfoud. Because one way or another, whichever way this contest goes, whether Jelena wins it or Amanda wins it, when they eventually lock horns with each other, it's going to be Sarah that the winner comes after. Sarah doesn't have anywhere near the experience of a Jelena Mrdjenovich or an Amanda Serrano. What I'm thinking is that Sarah, she better use this time wisely, because time is short. Time is of the essence. Both of these girls, they're going to be in action before the year is out. The target date is December 17th. And with those things in mind, I think it's important that Sarah, perhaps, if it's possible, see about having a gimme fight of her own. I mean, if she can, if that's viable. Because very soon, one of these girls is going to come knocking on her door. That's just the reality of it. That might be several months out, several months from now, well into 2021. But it's an eventuality.
It's only a matter of time.
Both of them are going to have their respective gimme fights this year, and they'll schedule a unification match between each other at some point into next year, and afterwards,
you know what time it is.
They're going to come looking for Sarah. It really isn't possible for Sarah to compensate for the experience that she lacks in retrospect with Jelena, in retrospect with Amanda. I mean, poor Sarah, she didn't even get to win the IBF title from the then reigning IBF champion, Jennifer Hahn. Sarah was basically elevated to IBF champion after Jennifer Hahn decided that she wanted to move up in weight. That fight, had Sarah got to have it, would have helped her garner valuable experience, which would have proved useful against a Jelena Mrdjenovich or an Amanda Serrano. But these are the breaks. That's the way the cookie crumbled. And in light of this, while the winner of Mrdjenovich versus Serrano isn't at Sarah's doorstep just yet, she better use this time wisely, because there's not much of it left. In minimum weight news, it appears that just a few days ago, a WBO champion was crowned when Etsuko locked horns with Ayaka Miyao. And this was a sequel to their initial fight that took place earlier this year in January. These girls locked horns at the beginning of this month, and Etsuko managed to score a 9th round TKO stoppage off a very short left hand, thereby becoming the minimum weight division's WBO champion. The first time these two girls fought earlier this year, they fought to a draw, whereas this time Etsuko decided she ain't gonna leave it to the judges. She's gonna take matters into her own hands, and she did off a very short left hand that took Ayaka Miyao out. What this essentially means is that there are now 4 active reigning world champions in the minimum weight division, making it that much harder to achieve undisputed status. Very soon, Tina Ruprecht and Yukasta Valle, the WBC and IBF champions, they're supposed to be locking horns on the 12th of this month. Regardless who wins that fucking fight, they'd still have to go through Etsuko, Japan's own Etsuko Tada, for the WBO title, and subsequently move on from that to take on Annabelle Ortiz, Mexico's own Annabelle Ortiz, for the WBA title, what would be the 4th and final piece of the puzzle. It's that much harder to achieve undisputed status now in the minimum weight division. No telling what the winner of Ruprecht versus Valle 2 is going to do. from the look of things, achieving undisputed status at this weight just became a lot more difficult. And, previously it was reported that the Ring Magazine title, the inaugural Ring Magazine title for the women's minimum weight division, is going to be on the line in the sequel to Ruprecht versus Valle. Though now I wonder that with Etsuko having won the WBO title, that piece of the puzzle, does that change things? Will the Ring Magazine title no longer be on the line? Because BoxRec has Etsuko ranked as the #1 minimum weight fighter in the world. Does Ring Magazine have it the same way? Really not sure. Perhaps not. The question now is, will the winner of Ruprecht versus Valle 2 make the decision to seek out Etsuko, to seek out Annabelle, unify with them? Moreover, will they decide to seek the winner of this fight out? Will they decide to take the initiative? Things are heating up in the minimum weight division. In Bridgerweight news, as strange as that might sound, the WBC has unveiled their inaugural Bridgerweight rank standings, and they look exactly as I expected them to look. Now, at number 1, they have Oscar Rivas. Oscar Rivas, otherwise known as a heavyweight. I mean, that's what he was when he fought Brian Jennings. That's what he was when he fought Dillian White. They've got Oscar Rivas in a pole position to become the very first, the inaugural Bridgerweight champion. And as you can imagine, the WBC is putting an earnest effort forth to get this division off the ground. That means that they're trying to put that Bridgerweight title in someone's hands so they can make it official, so that this division, can be accepted, so that they can get the ball rolling for it. Though in truth, without the participation of the fighters themselves, the lifeblood of the division, it's what I always told you, the division don't get off the ground. Now, I don't know if Oscar Rivas is or isn't receptive to accepting a Bridgerweight title by way of the WBC, it being that this isn't unanimous, this isn't across the board. There is no Bridgerweight division in the IBF, WBO, or WBA's ranked standings, at least not right now, at least not for the time being. This is largely experimental, and without the participation of the fighters themselves, without the fighters making a conscious decision to campaign at this weight and shoot for a title here, reiterate, the division don't get off the ground. There are no big names in this weight class. I mean, there are recognizable names of, contenders, a whole heap of journeymen. I mean, look, Dmitry Kudryashev's name is there.
That guy.
And I'd sooner believe that a Dmitry Kudryashev or maybe a Bryant Jennings, the kind of guys that have been through the ringer, haven't had much success in the heavyweight division, perhaps might look at this as an opportunity to become world champions. Because they've tried to do so in the heavyweight division and that just hasn't panned out for them. Whereas here, the competition isn't as stiff.
Not really.
It was Spilka, top 10 Bridgerweight. Alen Babic, does he even know that they ranked him here? Because, Alen Babic, the Savage, he's after his countryman, Filip Hrgovic, who's a heavyweight. I don't know that Alen would be receptive to campaigning as a Bridgerweight just because the WBC says so, but he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who would go for these queens of shenanigans. Maybe guys like Kudryashov, maybe a guy like Spilka, maybe they might put some value on a Bridgerweight title because, they've tried things in the Cruiserweight division. Artur, he tried things in the Heavyweight division. Things didn't work out. And perhaps those kinds of guys would look at this as an opportunity. But Alen Babic, an unbeaten fighter who's gaining momentum, gaining steam, gaining a following.
Is he going to campaign here?
I don't imagine that he's going to be accepting, of this, decision from the WBC. I'm not even sure he's aware that they're ranking him as a Bridgerweight. There are no big names here. No Tyson Furies, no Deontay Wilders, certainly not any Anthony Joshuas. And without those kinds of big names, there are no big name paydays. And this is prize fighting after all. This is pugilism. These guys, some of them are fighting for legacy, some of them are fighting for a check. But better still, in the absence of those kinds of names and that kind of marquee value, I imagine that a lot of these fighters aren't going to bother campaigning in this Bridgerweight division. There's no money to be made here off of any of these guys. It creates a situation to where you could put all these guys in one room and let them kill each other, and it wouldn't yield the same marquee value of a Derek Chisora fight, a Dillian White fight. Certainly not the marquee value of a Tyson Fury or Anthony Joshua fight. And rest assured that these prize fighters, for their hard work, for their hard labor, they want those kinds of paydays, and they can't get them campaigning as Bridgerweights.
Even if you put a world title in their hand.
What the hell's that gonna do towards their marquee value in a division that no one watches? What the hell's that supposed to do?
Goddamn joke is what it is.
What the hell is this? What the hell are we talking about here? Artur Spilka? Arlen Pavic? Bryant Jennings? Marco Huck? Let me tell you something. Those guys, if they're still hanging around, it's because they want paydays. I mean, who doesn't? I'd like a goddamn payday, and, they're really not gonna find that campaigning at this weight. There's just no money here. So the WBC can be in a hurry to crown their inaugural Bridgerweight champion. But that offers little incentive to the fighters themselves, because what they'll find is they'd likely make more money campaigning as heavyweight contenders instead of being crowned a Bridgerweight champion. Being a Bridgerweight champion ain't gonna get you but so much money. You go up there to the heavyweight division, you take your chances, and even in defeat, you stand to make more money than you would at Bridgerweight. Oscar Rivas, the number one contender in the Bridgerweight rank standings. This is a guy who was given $1 million payday, $1 million plus, just to face little old Dillian White. Do you think that kind of money's floating around in this division? Likely not. For that reason, I don't think that Oscar's gonna shoot for that title. I'd be surprised if he did, because he stands to make more money staying put, staying in the heavyweight division. And, if the WBC don't like it, guess what? There are 3 other sanctioning bodies out there that don't have this Bridgerweight experiment, this Bridgerweight division. So, I maintain my original position. I'd be very surprised if fighters actually decide to voluntarily campaign here, because there's no money in this weight class. And finally, I'm sure that most of you have heard by now, it's official. Joe Smith Jr. is going to be taking on Maxim Vlasov for what is the vacant WBO light heavyweight title. And while many of you in this part of the world are already familiar with Joe Smith Jr. and what he can do, Maxim Vlasov may come as a mystery. So, what do we need to know about this guy? I'll tell you what we need to know about this guy. This is a guy who's campaigned anywhere from light heavyweight to cruiserweight. This kid, he's a big kid, very generous dimensions as far as light heavyweights go. It's about 6'3.5", 6'4". He's got about 48 professional fights total. 45 wins, 3 losses, 26 knockouts, and he's never been stopped.
There's a first time for everything.
And Maxim, he's been in there with some familiar faces, he has. He fought Isaac Chilemba 2 times. He fought him once in 2011, lost a decision to Isaac, subsequently had a rematch with Isaac 8 years later, 2019, July of last year. Won a decision, so he's 1-1 with Isaac Chilemba.
Those were both light heavyweight contests.
He also locked horns with Zero Ramirez back in 2015. That was also a light heavyweight contest. He lost that decision to Zerto, subsequently moved up to the cruiserweight division. Had a lot of fights there, he did. He bumped into Durudola there, beat him there, bumped into Krzysztof Glowacki there, lost a decision to Glowacki, and he has since made the decision to move back down to light heavyweight. And he's coming off of 3 wins in a row. Maxim Vlasov, 34 years old, not the oldest guy, not the youngest either. Comparatively, if you were to hold both of these guys' resumes side by side, you would come to the conclusion that Joe Smith Jr. has fought much better fighters than Maxim Vlasov, and you would come to the conclusion that Joe Smith Jr. comparatively has racked up more meaningful victories in situations where he was favored to lose. He's racked up more meaningful victories than Maxim Vlasov. People tend to forget that, he was favored to lose the Fonfara fight. He was favored to lose the Hopkins fight. In the Sullivan-Barrera fight, a fight that Joe lost, he fought with a broken jaw. That's how tough this guy is. Joe Smith Jr., like Maxim Vlasov.
He's tough.
He's not gonna crumble off the first hard shot that lands. And this guy packs one of the most devastating punches in the light heavyweight division. I dare say that he's the power guy in this situation, in spite of Maxim being the much more statuesque fighter in the fight. And yet another thing that's working for Joe in this situation is that Joe ain't got no ring rust to have to shake off, you understand, because Joe was in action. He managed to get 2 fights in this year. Did you guys forget that in January, he gave Jesse Hart that shellacking upon Jesse Hart's ascent to the light heavyweight division? Did you forget about that? Did you forget about what he just did to Eleider Alvarez in August? Joe Smith Jr., he's sharp. He's been busy. Whereas Maxim, this guy ain't had a fight since November of last year when he took on unbeaten Emmanuel Marty. The night of the fight, once February rolls around, it will have been over a year since Maxim Vlasov, 34-year-old Maxim Vlasov, has seen any action. I think that favors Joe. On top of Joe having fought better fighters, having more meaningful victories, and showing improvement. Though ultimately, styles do make fights, don't they? And if you look at the tape on Maxim Vlasov, he's not a bad fighter. Good speed in those hands. Snappy punches, very statuesque. I like his activity. I like that he's a busy fighter. I like the bounce in his step. But what I don't see is a guy who's going to offset the come-forward aggression and pressure fighting of Joe Smith Jr. What I see in Maxim Vlasov is a guy who's going to get in those exchanges with Joe. A guy who's going to give Joe the opportunities to use his power. And it's for this reason that I favor Joe Smith Jr. to win the fight. I favor him to win the fight and become the new WBO light heavyweight champion.